In a galaxy where humans are considered the youngest and weakest species, where ancient alien empires view them as barely civilized primitives, one moment of pure human instinct is about to shatter every preconceived notion about what it means to be strong. When Princess Zara-Th of the mighty Veltar Empire finds herself seconds away from death in the cold vacuum of space, the last thing she expects is salvation from a human cargo pilot. But Marcus Chen doesn't hesitate. He doesn't calculate the political ramifications or consider the species barriers. He simply acts with that uniquely human trait that has puzzled philosophers across the galaxy for centuries, the willingness to risk everything for a stranger. What begins as a split-second rescue becomes a catalyst that threatens to topple empires, challenge ancient traditions, and prove that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in weapons or technology, but in the simple human refusal to let someone die when you have the power to save them. This is the story of how one human's compassion became a declaration of war against the old ways, and how a princess caught between duty and gratitude must choose between the crown that has defined her entire existence and the future that could redefine what it means to be alive in a galaxy that desperately needs to learn what humanity truly represents. The cargo hauler Defiant Dream drifted through the Nexus corridor like a speck of metal against the infinite black. Marcus Chen adjusted his position in the pilot's seat, working out a crick in his neck as he monitored the long-range scanners. 3 months of hauling industrial components between human colonies and alien trade stations had left him with more aches than credits, but it was honest work in a galaxy that didn't always offer humans such luxuries. The proximity alarm chimed softly, indicating another ship in the shipping lane ahead. Marcus glanced at the scanner display, expecting to see another cargo vessel or perhaps a patrol cruiser. Instead, the signature made him sit up straighter. The ship was massive, elegant, and broadcasting identification codes that made his heart skip a beat. Veltar Imperial Cruiser. One of the most advanced warships in known space, belonging to one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. Marcus had never seen a Veltar ship up close. The few humans who had were usually diplomats or prisoners, and he definitely wasn't diplomatic material. He adjusted his course slightly to give the massive vessel plenty of space, knowing that protocol demanded smaller ships yield to Imperial vessels. The Veltar were old blood, ancient nobility among the stars, and they had little patience for younger species like humanity. The Imperial cruiser Eternal Glory cut through space with the fluid grace that marked all Veltar technology. Its biometallic hull rippled with patterns that seemed almost alive, and energy conduits pulsed with a soft blue light along its kilometer-long form. Marcus couldn't help but admire the ship's beauty, even as he felt a familiar knot of inadequacy in his stomach. Human ships were functional, efficient, but they looked like crude hammers next to the artistic perfection of Veltar engineering. He was about to return his attention to his own navigation when something caught his eye on the scanner. A small object had detached from the Imperial cruiser, moving away at high speed. Marcus frowned and adjusted the scanner sensitivity. The object was tiny compared to the massive warship, but it was broadcasting a weak distress signal. Emergency beacon. Someone was in trouble. Marcus hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Getting involved with Veltar business was a good way to end up in an interrogation cell or worse. The Imperial species were notoriously protective of their privacy and extremely suspicious of outsiders. But the distress signal was growing weaker, and something about the trajectory suggested the small craft was tumbling out of control. He made his decision the way humans always did when someone was in danger. He didn't think about consequences or political ramifications. He thought about the fact that somebody was going to die if he didn't act. Marcus changed course toward the distress signal, pushing his engines to maximum burn. The Defiant Dream wasn't fast by military standards, but she was reliable, and her cargo hold could be pressurized for emergency rescue operations. As he drew closer, his scanners resolved the distressed craft into what appeared to be an escape pod, its hull scorched and partially breached. The pod was spinning slowly, venting atmosphere in crystalline streams that caught the light from the nearby star. Whoever was inside had maybe minutes before their life support failed completely. Marcus activated his ship's emergency protocols, flooding the cargo bay with breathable atmosphere and preparing the medical station. He maneuvered the Defiant Dream alongside the pod with careful precision, using his ship's tractor beam to slow its tumble and draw it into the cargo hold. The moment the pod was secure, Marcus was out of his pilot's seat and running toward the cargo bay, emergency medical kit in hand. The escape pod's hatch had been damaged in whatever explosion had launched it from the Imperial cruiser. Marcus grabbed a plasma cutter from his toolkit and began working on the twisted metal, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Sparks flew as he cut through the reinforced alloy, and he could hear the hiss of escaping air growing weaker by the second. The hatch finally gave way, and Marcus pulled it aside to reveal the pod's interior. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. The occupant was definitely Veltar, but unlike any description he'd read in the cultural briefings. She was tall and graceful even while unconscious, with the characteristic pale blue skin and silver hair of her species. But there was something else about her, an aura of authority and refinement that spoke of nobility. More immediately concerning was the blood. She had a deep gash across her forehead, and her breathing was shallow and rapid. Marcus didn't hesitate. He'd trained as a paramedic before becoming a cargo pilot, and injured was injured regardless of species. He carefully extracted her from the pod, checking for spinal injuries as he moved her to the medical station. Her eyes opened as he was running the medical scanner over her injuries, and Marcus found himself looking into irises the color of liquid mercury. For a moment, neither of them moved. He'd never been this close to a Veltar before, and he was struck by how human she seemed despite the obvious differences. Fear, confusion, and pain were universal expressions, it seemed. "Easy," Marcus said softly, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You're safe. Your pod was damaged, but you're aboard my ship now. I'm going to treat your injuries." She tried to sit up, wincing as the movement aggravated her head wound. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality typical of the Veltar language, but she was speaking accented but clear standard galactic. "You are human," she said, and there was surprise in her tone rather than disgust. "Why did you rescue me?" Marcus paused in his medical preparations, genuinely puzzled by the question. "Because you were in trouble. Because you would have died if I didn't. But I am Veltar. Your species and mine are not allies." "You're a person," Marcus replied, beginning to clean her head wound with gentle efficiency. "Politics doesn't matter when someone's dying in space." She studied his face as he worked, and Marcus could sense her confusion. He'd heard that the Veltar were raised with strict hierarchies and complex social protocols. The idea of someone helping a stranger from a different species, especially one considered inferior, probably didn't fit into her worldview. The medical scanner beeped, indicating a completed analysis. Marcus reviewed the results with relief. Concussion, some bruised ribs, minor lacerations, but nothing life-threatening. Her species' physiology was similar enough to human that his medical supplies would work, though he'd need to adjust the dosages. "You have a concussion," he told her as he prepared a painkiller injection. "And some other minor injuries. Nothing that won't heal, but you need rest." "I am Princess Zarath of House Valamoth," she said formally, as if the title explained something important. "Daughter of Emperor Thaindar and heir to the imperial throne." Marcus nearly dropped the medical injector. A princess. He'd just rescued an alien princess. The political implications hit him like a physical blow, but he pushed them aside. Injured was injured, royal or not. "Pleased to meet you, Your Highness. I'm Marcus Chen, cargo pilot and, apparently your emergency medical technician for today." He administered the painkiller with the same gentle care he'd shown before learning her identity. Princess Zarath seemed taken aback by his casual response. "You do not seem concerned about my status." "Should I be?" "You're hurt, you needed help, I helped. The rest is just details." Marcus began applying healing gel to her cuts. "What happened to your ship?" Her expression darkened, and, for a moment Marcus saw something dangerous flash in those silver eyes. "Sabotage. An explosion in the royal quarters. Someone tried to kill me." "Any idea who?" "There are always those who would benefit from my death," she said bitterly. "The imperial succession has many interested parties." Marcus finished treating her wounds and helped her to a more comfortable position. "Well, whoever they are, they failed. You're alive, and you're safe on my ship. For now. But they will come looking for me. When they discover what happened, when they realize a human rescued me. She trailed off, studying his face. You may have signed your own death warrant by saving me. Marcus shrugged, a very human gesture that seemed to fascinate her. Wouldn't be the first time I've made a bad decision. Besides, I've got a fast ship and a talent for disappearing when necessary. You speak of death so casually. Better to live helping people than to die safe and useless, Marcus replied, beginning to clean up his medical supplies. Besides, I couldn't just leave you floating out there. That's not who humans are. Princess Zara-Th was quiet for a long time, studying this human who had risked everything to save a stranger. In her world, every action had consequences, every relationship had political implications, every kindness had a price. But, this human seemed to operate by completely different rules. In my culture, she said finally, when someone saves the life of another, a debt is created. A life debt that can only be repaid in kind. No debt, Marcus said firmly. I didn't save you to put you in my debt. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. You do not understand. The debt exists whether you claim it or not. By the laws of my people, my life belongs to you until I can save yours in return. Marcus looked up from his medical kit, seeing the serious expression on her face. That sounds like a complicated way to live. It is the way things are. Honor demands it. Before Marcus could respond, his ship's proximity alarms began sounding. Multiple contacts, approaching fast. He moved to the cargo bay's monitor and felt his stomach drop. 3 Veltar destroyers were closing on his position, their weapons systems already charging. Looks like your people found us, Marcus said, his voice calm despite the situation. Princess Zara-Th struggled to sit up, her face pale. They will board your ship. They will demand answers. Let me guess. Humans aren't usually trusted with royal rescues? Humans are not usually trusted at all. Marcus activated the intercom system as the lead destroyer hailed his ship. The face that appeared on the screen was definitely Veltar, but older and harder than the princess, with scars across his neck that spoke of military service. Human vessel, you will prepare to be boarded. You are suspected of attacking an imperial ship and abducting a member of the royal family. Negative, Marcus replied calmly. I rescued a survivor from an escape pod. The princess is injured but safe. The Veltar officer's expression didn't change. You will surrender yourself for interrogation. Any resistance will be met with destruction. Marcus looked at Princess Zara-Th, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. He could surrender, hope that her word would protect him, and probably spend the rest of his life in an alien prison. Or he could run, knowing that they'd probably destroy his ship before he made it to hyperspace. Or he could trust that the princess meant what she said about honor and debt. Your Highness, he said formally, I believe this is where you earn that life debt. Princess Zara-Th's eyes widened slightly, and then, a slow smile spread across her face. She activated the communications system herself. Commander Vextar, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority despite her injuries. You will stand down your weapons immediately. This human is under my personal protection. The commander's scarred face showed surprise. Your Highness, our orders are to secure you and arrest anyone involved in the attack on your ship. Your orders are to follow my commands, as I am heir to the imperial throne. Marcus Chen saved my life at considerable risk to his own. He is to be treated with the honor due to a protector of the royal family. Marcus watched the exchange with fascination. This was politics on a level he'd never experienced, or a few words could mean the difference between honor and execution. Princess Zara-Th's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, and, even through the communication system, he could feel the power behind her words. Commander Vextar clearly wasn't happy with the situation, but royal commands were not suggestions. As you command, Your Highness. We will escort your rescuer to the nearest imperial station for debriefing. No, the princess said firmly. Marcus Chen will accompany me to the imperial palace. The emperor himself will want to hear how a human cargo pilot succeeded where our security forces failed. The silence that followed was pregnant with tension. Marcus realized that Princess Zarath had just made a statement that would echo through the highest levels of the Veltar Empire. She was bringing a human to the Imperial Palace, presenting him to her father as a hero rather than a threat. "Your Highness," Commander Vextar said carefully, "perhaps it would be wiser to handle this matter more quietly." "Wisdom is knowing when to honor those who deserve it," Princess Zarath replied. "Prepare the royal transport. We depart for the homeworld immediately." As the communication ended, Marcus realized that his simple act of rescue had just launched him into the center of alien politics at the highest level. Princess Zarath was looking at him with something that might have been respect or might have been calculation. "You realize what you just did?" Marcus asked. "I honored my debt," she replied simply. "But, I should warn you, Marcus-chan. By accepting my protection, by agreeing to come to the Imperial Palace, you have just stepped onto a battlefield where words are weapons and every smile hides a blade." Marcus considered this, then shrugged in that uniquely human way. "Wouldn't be the first dangerous job I've taken. Besides, someone's got to show these ancient empires what humans are really made of." Princess Zarath stared at him for a long moment, and then she did something that surprised them both. She laughed, a sound like silver bells in the cargo bay of a human ship, and, for the first time since her rescue, Marcus saw genuine warmth in those mercury-colored eyes. Outside, the Veltar destroyers were taking formation around the Defiant Dream, preparing to escort a human cargo pilot to the heart of one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. Neither Marcus nor Princess Zarath could have imagined that this moment, this simple decision to value life over politics, would soon shake the foundations of the established order itself. The Imperial Palace of Velterra Prime materialized before Marcus's eyes like something from a dream. As the royal transport descended through the planet's crystalline atmosphere, he pressed his face to the viewport and tried to process what he was seeing. The palace wasn't just built on the landscape, it seemed to grow from it, organic curves and flowing lines that made it appear as though the entire structure had bloomed from the planet's surface like an impossible flower. Spires stretched toward the sky in graceful spirals, their surfaces shifting color with the movement of the twin suns overhead. Gardens cascaded down terrace levels in waterfalls of exotic plants that Marcus couldn't name, their bioluminescent blooms creating patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with some unheard music. The scale was overwhelming. The main palace complex could have housed a human city, and the grounds stretched beyond the horizon. "Impressive, isn't it?" Princess Zarath said from the seat beside him. She'd recovered remarkably during the 3-day journey, though Marcus noticed she still favored her left side where her ribs had been bruised. "It's beautiful," Marcus admitted. "And terrifying. How many people live here?" "The palace houses approximately 50,000 souls," she replied casually, as if that were a reasonable number for a residence. "Courtiers, servants, guards, advisors, extended royal family, diplomatic staff. The imperial court is essentially a city unto itself." Marcus did some quick math and felt his stomach drop. He'd grown up in colonies where 1,000 people was considered a large settlement. The idea of 50,000 people all focused on the business of running an empire was staggering. "And they're all going to want to know about the human who rescued their princess," he said. "Oh, they already know," Zarath replied with a slight smile. "Word travels fast in the imperial court. By now, every noble family will have received reports about you. They'll be analyzing your background, your motivations, your potential usefulness or threat to their interests." "Great. I've been here 5 minutes and I'm already part of their politics." "You became part of imperial politics the moment you pulled me from that escape pod," she said seriously. "The only question now is whether you can survive it." The transport settled onto a landing platform that jutted out from one of the palace's mid-level spires. Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see Veltar courtiers gathering to observe their arrival, their elegant forms draped in flowing robes that seemed to shift color in the changing light. They moved with the fluid grace characteristic of their species, but Marcus noticed how they positioned themselves. Even their casual arrangements spoke of hierarchy and careful social positioning. "Remember," Zarath said as they prepared to disembark, "in Veltar culture, everything is about honor, precedence, and face. How you are perceived in these first moments will determine how you are treated for the remainder of your time here." "Any specific advice?" "Stand straight, speak clearly, and don't try to be something you're not." Veltar have excellent instincts for detecting deception, and they despise those who present false faces. The transport doors opened with a soft hiss, and Marcus stepped onto Veltar soil for the first time. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, making him feel oddly buoyant, and the air carried scents unlike anything in human space. Something floral and complex, with undertones of ozone and something that reminded him of cinnamon. Princess Zaratiech emerged from the transport with the bearing of someone born to command. Despite her recent injuries, she moved with fluid authority, and Marcus could see the assembled courtiers shift their attention to her like plants turning toward the sun. The change in her demeanor was remarkable. Aboard his ship, she'd been injured and vulnerable. Here, she was royalty. Honored courtiers, she announced in a voice that carried clearly across the platform, I present Marcus Chen of the Human Colonial Alliance. He risked his own life to save mine when assassins sought to end the imperial bloodline. By his courage and selflessness, the succession remains secure. The assembled Veltar nobles studied Marcus with expressions he couldn't read. Their faces were masks of polite interest, but he could sense undercurrents of surprise, curiosity, and, in some cases, what might have been hostility. He'd never felt so utterly foreign, so completely out of place. A tall figure emerged from the crowd, and Marcus immediately recognized the bearing of someone accustomed to command. The newcomer wore robes of deep blue that seemed to capture and hold light, and his silver hair was bound with what appeared to be living metal that moved of its own accord. Most notably, he shared Zaratiech's distinctive mercury-colored eyes. Father, Princess Zaratiech said formally, inclining her head in precisely the correct degree of respect for a daughter greeting an emperor. Emperor Thaindar was an imposing figure even by Veltar standards. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, and his presence seemed to fill the space around him. When his gaze settled on Marcus, it felt like being examined by something far more than human. There was intelligence in those eyes, but also calculation and power that had been refined over centuries of rule. So, the Emperor said, his voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's bones vibrate, this is the human who succeeded where our Imperial Guard failed. Marcus straightened, remembering Zaratiech's advice about standing tall. Your Majesty. I was in the right place at the right time. Anyone would have done the same. Emperor Thaindar's eyes narrowed slightly. Would they? In my experience, Marcus Chen, most beings act first for their own interests. Yet you risked your life for a stranger from a species your people barely know. Your daughter needed help, Marcus replied simply. Everything else is just details. A murmur ran through the assembled courtiers. Marcus caught fragments of whispered conversations in the musical Veltar language, and, while he couldn't understand the words, the tone suggested surprise and, perhaps some approval. Just details, the Emperor repeated, and Marcus couldn't tell if he was amused or offended. You dismiss the political implications of your actions as mere details? With respect, Your Majesty, when someone's dying in space, politics seem kind of irrelevant. Princess Zaratiech shot him a warning look, but Emperor Thaindar studied Marcus with what might have been growing interest. Walk with me, Marcus Chen, the Emperor commanded. Let us discuss these irrelevant politics. The Emperor turned and began walking toward the palace proper, his robes flowing behind him like liquid starlight. Princess Zaratiech fell into step beside her father, and Marcus followed, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes tracking his every movement. The interior of the palace was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Corridors flowed into each other like organic passages, their walls covered with what appeared to be living murals that shifted and changed as they watched. The ceiling disappeared into luminous mists high overhead, and the floor beneath Marcus's feet felt warm and slightly yielding, as if they were walking on something alive. Tell me about your people, Marcus Chen, the Emperor said as they walked. What drives humans to act as you did? Marcus considered the question carefully. He was walking through an alien palace with an emperor who could probably order his death with a casual gesture, but the question seemed genuine. I think it's because we're young, Marcus said finally. As a species, I mean. We haven't had time to develop complex systems for deciding who deserves help and who doesn't. When we see someone in trouble, we tend to act first and think about consequences later. A dangerous way to live, observed Emperor Thaindar. Sometimes. But it also means we don't waste time with politics when lives are at stake. They entered a vast chamber that Marcus realized must be the throne room, though it looked nothing like the rigid formal spaces he'd seen in human governmental buildings. The space flowed around a central dais like water around a stone, and the walls were covered with something that looked like crystal and moss that pulsed with soft light. "You see simplicity where we see complexity," the emperor mused, settling onto a throne that seemed to grow from the living floor. "Where we see careful balance of competing interests, you see unnecessary delay." "I see people in need of help," Marcus replied. "The rest we can figure out afterwards." Princess Zaratiech had taken her place at her father's right hand, but Marcus noticed she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Pride? Concern? Calculation? "My daughter tells me that you refuse to accept the life debt she owes you," Emperor Thaindar continued. "This is puzzling to us. Life debts are valuable currency in our society." "I don't want to own anybody's life," Marcus said. "I helped because I could, not because I wanted something in return. Yet by our laws and customs, the debt exists regardless of your desire to claim it. My daughter's life belongs to you until she can repay the favor in kind." Marcus looked at Princess Zaratiech, seeing something in her expression that might have been gratitude or might have been resignation. "Then, I release her from it. Consider the debt paid." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in the stillness, and he began to wonder if he'd just committed some terrible breach of protocol. Emperor Thaindar leaned forward on his throne, his mercury eyes fixed on Marcus with laser intensity. "You cannot release a life debt, human. It is not yours to release. It belongs to the one who owes it." "Then, Princess Zaratiech can decide what to do with it," Marcus said. "But I won't hold anyone hostage to something they didn't choose." "Fascinating," the emperor murmured. "You treat matters of honor as if they were business transactions to be negotiated." "I treat people like people," Marcus replied, beginning to feel frustrated with the circular nature of the conversation. "Honor is nice, but it shouldn't be a prison." Princess Zaratiech stepped forward, and Marcus could see tension in her posture. "Father, perhaps we should discuss Marcus's accommodations while he's our guest." "Indeed." Emperor Thaindar rose from his throne, his full height making Marcus feel like a child. "Marcus Chen, you will be housed in the quarters traditionally reserved for honored allies. You will have access to the palace grounds and libraries, and you will dine with the imperial family." "That's very generous, Your Majesty, but I should probably head back to my ship soon. I've got cargo deliveries to make." The emperor's expression shifted subtly, and Marcus realized he'd said something wrong. Princess Zaratiech was shaking her head almost imperceptibly. "I fear that won't be possible," Emperor Thaindar said smoothly. "You see, Marcus Chen, the attack on my daughter's ship was not random. Someone with access to imperial security codes and detailed knowledge of royal movements tried to assassinate the heir to the throne. Until we identify the traitor, everyone connected to this incident remains under imperial protection." The phrase imperial protection didn't sound like protection to Marcus. It sounded like house arrest with better accommodations. "How long might that take?" Marcus asked carefully. "Difficult to say. Such investigations can take months, even years. But you'll be comfortable here, I assure you." Marcus looked around the opulent throne room, at the alien nobles watching him with unreadable expressions, at Princess Zaratiech whose face had become a careful mask. He was trapped in paradise, a guest who couldn't leave, at the center of political machinations he didn't understand. "In the meantime," the emperor continued, "you'll have the opportunity to learn about our culture, our history, our ways. Perhaps you'll come to understand why we find your people so interesting." A courtier approached the throne with fluid grace, whispering something in the emperor's ear. Marcus caught the musical syllables of the Veltar language but couldn't make out any meaning. Emperor Thaindar nodded and turned back to Marcus. "It seems word of your presence has already reached the other noble houses. There are requests for audiences, invitations to social functions, offers of alliance and partnership." The emperor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've become quite popular, Marcus Chen." "I just wanted to help someone," Marcus said quietly. "And, in doing so, you've demonstrated that humans possess qualities our society has forgotten how to value," Princess Zaratiech said. qualities that some will see as refreshing and others will see as dangerous. Marcus was beginning to understand the complexity of his situation. He wasn't just a guest in the palace, he was a symbol, a disruption to the established order, a living example of different values that challenged the way things had always been done. "Your Highness," he said to Princess Zarath, "what exactly does a life debt mean in practical terms?" She glanced at her father before answering. "It means that my life is forfeit to you until I can save yours in return. It means that I cannot marry, cannot accept other obligations, cannot fully participate in society until the debt is discharged." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "You're saying that by saving your life, I've ruined it?" "No," she said firmly. "You've complicated it enormously, but you haven't ruined it. The debt can be discharged, the obligations can be met. But it requires the right circumstances." "What kind of circumstances?" Emperor Thaindar answered instead of his daughter. "The kind that may be approaching sooner than any of us expected. You see, Marcus Chen, your rescue of my daughter has created ripples throughout the empire. Some see it as proof that humans deserve greater respect and consideration. Others see it as evidence that our security has become dangerously lax. And, still others, Princess Zarath added quietly, see it as an opportunity to advance their own agendas." Marcus was escorted to his quarters by a parade of servants who seemed determined to anticipate his every need. The rooms were larger than his entire apartment back home, with walls that shifted color in response to his mood and furniture that adjusted itself to his body automatically. There was a balcony that overlooked gardens where alien flowers sang in the evening breeze, and a bathroom that included a bathing pool filled with water that sparkled with harmless bioluminescence. It was beautiful, luxurious, and felt exactly like the gilded cage it was. As Marcus stood on the balcony watching Velterra Prime's twin suns set behind the palace spires, he couldn't help but wonder what he'd gotten himself into. He'd made a simple decision to help someone in trouble, and somehow that had landed him in the middle of imperial politics, ancient customs, and what was beginning to feel like a very dangerous game. Below in the gardens, he could see figures moving among the singing flowers. Courtiers, perhaps, or guards, or assassins. In this place, he was beginning to realize, the distinctions might be academic. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Marcus turned to see Princess Zarath entering his quarters. She'd changed from her formal court robes into something simpler but no less elegant, and she moved with the careful control of someone who knew she was being watched. "How are you finding your accommodations?" she asked formally. "Comfortable," Marcus replied, understanding that they were probably being monitored. "Though I have to admit, I'm not used to this level of luxury." "Perhaps we could take a walk in the gardens," she suggested. "The evening air is quite pleasant, and I could show you some of our native flora." Marcus understood the subtext. She wanted to talk somewhere with less surveillance. They descended to the gardens through corridors that seemed to anticipate their passage, walls glowing softly to light their way. The gardens were even more magnificent up close, with pathways that wound between groves of trees whose bark was like polished metal and flowers that chimed softly when the breeze touched their petals. When they were well away from the palace buildings, walking along a path that followed a stream filled with luminous fish, Princess Zarath finally spoke freely. "I need you to understand what you've walked into," she said quietly. "The attack on my ship wasn't just about assassinating me. It was about disrupting the succession, throwing the empire into chaos. Who benefits from that? Several noble houses who believe they have better claims to the throne. My uncle, Prince Demon, who has always believed he should have been named heir instead of me. Elements within the imperial military who think the empire has become too soft, too willing to negotiate with younger species like humanity." Marcus absorbed this information as they walked. "And my being here complicates things how?" "You represent everything they fear about human influence," Zarath explained. "You acted without regard for proper channels, without consideration for political consequences, without respect for established hierarchies. To them, you're proof that human values are dangerous to the imperial way of life. But, to you?" She was quiet for a long time, watching the luminous fish dart through the water. "To me, you're proof that perhaps the imperial way of life needs to change." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, and Marcus found himself relaxing despite the political tensions. The gardens were peaceful, and Princess Zaratiech's company was surprisingly easy. She didn't seem to expect constant deference or formal speech when they were alone. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus said eventually. "You may ask." "I may not answer." "What's it like, growing up knowing you'll rule an empire someday?" Zaratiech considered the question carefully. "Lonely," she said finally. "Everything you do is analyzed for political implications. Every friendship is scrutinized for advantage. Every word is weighed for its impact on the succession. You learn to be careful, to think 3 moves ahead, to never let anyone see your true feelings." "That sounds exhausting." "It is. Which is why what you did was so remarkable to me. You acted from pure instinct, pure compassion, without any calculation at all. I'd never experienced anything like that." They'd reached a small pavilion beside a waterfall that sang with crystalline notes as it fell into a pool lined with stones that glowed like captured starlight. Princess Zaratiech settled onto a bench, and Marcus sat beside her, maintaining the careful distance that protocol demanded. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we navigate the treacherous waters of imperial politics," she replied. "My father will use your presence to make a point about human potential. The noble houses will try to use you to advance their own agendas. And, somewhere in the shadows, whoever tried to kill me will be planning their next move." "And the life debt?" Princess Zaratiech turned to look at him directly, and, in the soft light of the glowing stones, her silver eyes seemed to hold depths he was only beginning to understand. "The life debt complicates everything and simplifies everything at the same time," she said. "It means that until it's discharged, we're bound together. Your fate and mine are intertwined whether we chose it or not." "I'm sorry," Marcus said sincerely. "I never meant to trap you in some kind of obligation." "You didn't trap me," she replied softly. "You freed me from a coffin in space. Everything else is just politics, and politics can be managed." As they sat beside the singing waterfall under alien stars, Marcus began to understand that his simple act of rescue had started something much larger than either of them had anticipated. He'd wanted to save one life, but he might have inadvertently changed the course of an entire empire. The question was whether the change would come soon enough to save both of them from the forces already moving in the shadows of the imperial palace. Marcus woke to the sound of chimes and found his quarters filled with servants preparing elaborate clothing for some event he hadn't been informed about. The garments were clearly designed for a formal Veltar occasion, with flowing lines and fabric that seemed to shift color as it moved, but they'd been tailored to accommodate human proportions. "What's all this for?" Marcus asked the lead servant, an elderly Veltar whose movements had the precise efficiency of decades of palace service. "The Grand Assembly convenes today, honored guest," the servant replied with a respectful bow. "Emperor Thaindar has commanded your presence to address the assembled houses of the realm." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Address them about what?" "That is not for me to say, honored guest. But Princess Zaratiech awaits your convenience in the Crystal Garden to brief you on protocol." 30 minutes later, dressed in alien finery that made him feel like he was wearing a costume, Marcus found Princess Zaratiech waiting beside a fountain carved from what appeared to be a single massive gem. She wore robes of deep green that complemented her pale blue skin, and her silver hair was arranged in complex patterns that spoke of royal protocol. "You look appropriately formal," she said, though Marcus caught a hint of amusement in her tone. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm about to step in front of a firing squad," Marcus admitted. "What exactly am I supposed to say to this grand assembly?" "My father wants you to tell them about human values," she explained as they began walking toward the palace's central complex. "About what motivated you to rescue me, about how your people approach problems like interspecies cooperation." "And what do they want to hear?" "That depends entirely on which faction you're speaking to at any given moment." Princess Zaratiech's expression grew serious. "Marcus, what I'm about to tell you is crucial for your survival today. The Grand Assembly contains every major noble house in the empire, and they're not gathering to welcome human influence into imperial politics." They entered a vast antechamber where other members of the imperial court were preparing for the assembly. Marcus noticed how conversations stopped when he appeared, how eyes tracked his movement with the intensity of predators evaluating potential prey. Let me explain the key players, Princess Zarath continued in a low voice. House Kefvar, led by Duke Morvain, controls most of the Empire's military shipbuilding. They believe humans represent a security threat and want stronger restrictions on human movement in Imperial space. A tall figure detached itself from a group of nobles and approached them. Duke Morvain was impressive even by Veltar standards, with scars along his neck that marked him as a veteran of the border wars. His eyes, when they settled on Marcus, held the cold evaluation of a professional soldier. Your Highness, the Duke said formally to Princess Zarath, then turned his attention to Marcus. And this must be our famous human hero. Duke Morvain, Marcus replied, offering what he hoped was an appropriate nod of respect. Tell me, Marcus Chen, in your human military doctrine, how do you classify the rescue of enemy personnel during active combat? The question was clearly a trap, but Marcus answered honestly. We don't consider injured people enemies, Your Grace. We consider them injured people who need help. Fascinating. And if that rescue compromised your mission objectives? Then, we'd find another way to complete the mission. Leaving people to die isn't really an option. Duke Morvain's expression didn't change, but Marcus sensed that his answer had revealed something the Duke found either admirable or dangerous. How refreshingly naive, the Duke murmured before moving away. He's testing you, Princess Zarath explained quietly. Trying to determine if human military thinking poses a threat to Imperial doctrine. And, does it? Imperial doctrine has kept us dominant for 3,000 years, she replied diplomatically. But, it's also led to stagnation in some areas. They were interrupted by the arrival of another noble, this one wearing robes so covered with precious metals and gems that he seemed to glitter as he moved. The newcomer's bearing spoke of wealth and privilege, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of a natural politician. Princess Zarath, he said with an elaborate bow. And our distinguished human guest. I am Count Sylvandar of House Nextul. We control much of the Empire's interstellar commerce. Pleased to meet you, Count, Marcus replied. The pleasure is entirely mine. I wanted to personally thank you for preserving our beloved princess. Such selfless heroism deserves recognition. I just did what anyone would do. Precisely my point, Count Sylvandar said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Your actions demonstrate the kind of direct, uncomplicated thinking that could revolutionize how we approach interspecies trade relations. Marcus was beginning to understand that every compliment came with an agenda attached. The Count believes that closer ties with human colonies could be economically beneficial, Princess Zarath explained after the noble had moved on. He sees you as a potential catalyst for expanded trade agreements. And the downside? The same as always. Every opportunity for some is a threat to others. Greater human involvement in imperial commerce means less control for the traditional trade houses. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the main entrance to the assembly chamber. Marcus turned to see a figure who commanded attention simply by entering the room. Prince Demon, Emperor Thanedar's younger brother, moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never doubted his own importance. Prince Demon was tall even by Veltar standards, with the distinctive Mercury eyes of the royal bloodline, but, where Emperor Thanedar projected controlled authority, Prince Demon radiated barely restrained ambition. His robes were magnificent, his bearing perfect, but there was something in his expression that made Marcus instinctively wary. My dear niece, Prince Demon said, approaching with arms spread in a gesture of familial warmth that somehow managed to feel threatening. How wonderful to see you recovered from your recent ordeal. Uncle, Princess Zarath replied formally, her voice carefully neutral. And this must be the famous human savior, Prince Demon continued, turning his full attention to Marcus. The cargo pilot who succeeded where Imperial security failed. I was just in the right place at the right time, Your Highness, Marcus replied carefully. Modesty. How refreshing. Prince Demon's smile was perfect and completely cold. Though I wonder, Marcus Chen, what you make of our Imperial customs. Do you find our ways overly complex for human sensibilities? Marcus felt the weight of dozens of watching eyes. This was clearly a crucial moment, though he wasn't entirely sure why. I find them different from what I'm used to, Marcus said honestly. But every culture has its own ways of organizing society. The important thing is that people are treated with dignity and respect. People, yes. But what about proper order? What about the careful balance of power that maintains stability across thousands of worlds? I think stability is important, Marcus replied slowly, but not at the expense of doing what's right. A murmur ran through the assembled nobles, and Marcus realized he'd just made a statement that could be interpreted as criticism of the imperial system. Prince Demon's smile widened. How fascinating. You prioritize individual moral decisions over systematic governance. Tell me, what happens when individual conscience conflicts with social necessity? I guess you have to decide what kind of person you want to be, Marcus replied. Indeed. Prince Demon's tone suggested that Marcus had just proved some important point. We'll have to continue this philosophical discussion later. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on imperial succession protocols. As Prince Demon moved away, Princess Zaratia's hand touched Marcus's arm in warning. Be very careful around my uncle, she whispered. He's brilliant, charismatic, and absolutely ruthless. And he's been arguing for years that the succession laws need to be reformed. Reformed how? Currently, succession follows strict primogeniture. The eldest child inherits regardless of gender. But there are other interpretations of imperial law that would favor experience over birth order, military achievement over civilian accomplishments. Marcus was beginning to understand the complexity of the political situation. Princess Zaratia's rescue hadn't just saved her life, it had preserved a particular vision of the empire's future. And there were clearly those who preferred an alternative vision. The assembly chamber was even more impressive than the throne room, with soaring walls that curved upward into a dome that seemed to open directly onto space. The floor was arranged in concentric circles with the royal platform at the center, and each noble house had its designated section marked with elaborate heraldic displays. As they took their places, Marcus noticed how the seating arrangements told a story of power and influence. Houses that supported the current succession sat closer to the royal platform, while those with different loyalties arranged themselves according to their own complex hierarchies. Emperor Thaindar entered with ceremony that took Marcus's breath away. The entire assembly rose as one, their robes creating a wave of color that rippled outward from the royal platform. The emperor's presence filled the massive space, and, when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner without apparent effort. Noble houses of the Veltar Empire, he began, his words echoing with harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. We gather today to address matters that concern the future of our realm. The emperor's gaze found Marcus in the crowd of nobles. Recent events have reminded us that the galaxy is larger and more complex than our borders might suggest. That wisdom and courage can emerge from unexpected sources. That our understanding of strength and honor might benefit from new perspectives. Marcus felt hundreds of eyes turn toward him, and he fought the urge to disappear into his formal robes. Marcus Chen of the Human Colonial Alliance, Emperor Thaindar continued, will address this assembly about the values that motivated his recent actions. Let us listen with the wisdom that has guided our empire for 3 millennia. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus rose from his seat, acutely aware that every word he spoke would be analyzed for political implications he couldn't even imagine. Your Majesty, honored nobles, Marcus began, his voice steadier than he felt. I'm not a politician or a diplomat. I'm a cargo pilot who was in the right place when someone needed help. Where I come from, when we see someone in trouble, we help. It's not about politics or advantage or what we might get in return. It's about recognizing that life has value, and that preserving life is more important than preserving systems. Another murmur ran through the assembly, and Marcus caught fragments of whispered conversations in the musical Veltar language. The galaxy is changing, Marcus continued. New species are reaching for the stars, new technologies are reshaping how we communicate and trade and explore. Change is coming whether we're ready for it or not. The question is whether we'll meet that change with fear or with hope. Duke Morvain rose from his section of the assembly. You speak of change as inevitability, human. But change can also mean destruction of everything we've built. It can, Marcus agreed. But it can also mean growth, learning, becoming something better than what we were before.
And if becoming something better means abandoning the principles that made us strong? This came from Count Sylvandar, though his tone was more curious than hostile.
Then, maybe those principles weren't as strong as you thought, Marcus replied. True strength isn't about maintaining control through fear or dominance. It's about inspiring others to be their best selves, about building something together that's greater than any one group could achieve alone. Prince Demon stood, and the assembly fell silent with an intensity that made the air itself seem to thicken.
Inspiring words, Marcus Chen.
But inspiration without wisdom is dangerous.
You speak of building together, but what happens when fundamental differences cannot be reconciled? When cooperation requires compromise of core values?
This was the crucial moment, Marcus realized. This was where he either found a way to bridge the gap between human and Veltar thinking, or where he inadvertently declared war on everything the Empire represented. Your Highness, Marcus said carefully, I think the answer depends on what you consider core values. If your core value is maintaining power over others, then, yes, cooperation is threatening. But, if your core value is creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to flourish, then, cooperation becomes essential.
And, who decides what flourishing means? Prince Demon pressed. Who determines which opportunities are appropriate for which species? Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could change everything. Maybe nobody decides, he said.
Maybe we trust people to make their own choices about their lives, and we focus on creating systems that support those choices rather than controlling them. The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. He'd just proposed something that sounded dangerously close to democracy to a hereditary empire, and the implications were rippling through the assembly like stones dropped into still water. Emperor Thaindar rose slowly from his throne, and every eye in the vast chamber turned toward him.
Fascinating perspective, the Emperor said finally.
And one that deserves careful consideration. The Emperor's gaze swept across the assembled nobles, lingering on various faces, reading expressions and measuring reactions. We will recess for private deliberations, he announced. Noble houses will prepare formal responses to what we have heard today.
Marcus Chen, you will remain as our guest while these deliberations proceed.
As the assembly began to disperse, Marcus realized that he'd just lit a fuse under the entire imperial political system. The question was whether the resulting explosion would create positive change or simply destroy everything in its path.
Princess Zareth appeared at his elbow as they were leaving the chamber.
That was either very brave or very foolish, she murmured.
Probably both, Marcus admitted. What happens now?
Now the real politics begin, she replied grimly. Every house will be calculating how your words affect their interests, and they'll be preparing accordingly.
Preparing for what?
Princess Zareth's expression was troubled as she looked back at the dispersing nobles.
For whatever comes next.
Because Marcus Chen, whether you intended it or not, you just challenged the fundamental assumptions that this empire has operated on for 3,000 years.
And that kind of challenge rarely goes unanswered.
As they walked through corridors filled with whispered conversations and meaningful glances, Marcus began to understand that saving Princess Zareth's life had been the easy part. The real challenge was surviving the consequences of that simple act of compassion in a political system that had forgotten how to value compassion at all. Behind them, in the gathering shadows of the great assembly chamber, forces were already beginning to move that would determine not just Marcus's fate, but the future direction of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The attack came 3 days after Marcus's address to the Grand Assembly, during the Festival of Stellar Convergence when the palace grounds were filled with celebrants from across the empire. Marcus had been walking with Princess Zareth through the sculpture gardens, discussing the political aftermath of his speech, when the world exploded into chaos. The first sign of trouble was the sudden absence of the singing flowers. The bioluminescent blooms that normally chimed in harmony with the evening breeze fell silent all at once, as if some invisible signal had passed through the garden. Princess Zareth stopped walking, her hand moving instinctively toward the ceremonial blade at her side. Something's wrong, she whispered, her voice tense with the authority of someone trained from birth to recognize danger. Marcus was about to ask what she meant when the first explosion rocked the northern section of the palace. The blast was distant but powerful enough to rattle the crystalline sculptures around them, sending harmonic vibrations through the air like the death songs of broken bells. Stay close to me, Princess Zarath commanded, drawing her blade in a motion so fluid it seemed like liquid mercury. The weapon's edge gleamed with its own light, marking it as one of the legendary plasma blades carried by Imperial royalty.
What's happening?
Marcus asked, his own instincts screaming for him to find cover or a weapon of his own.
Palace coup, she replied grimly. The timing is too precise to be coincidence.
Someone's using the festival crowds as cover for an assault on the royal quarter. A second explosion, closer this time, lit up the evening sky with harsh orange light. In the distance, Marcus could see smoke rising from one of the palace's residential spires, and the sound of weapons fire was beginning to echo off the surrounding buildings. Princess Zarath activated a communication device hidden in her formal robes.
Palace Guard Command, this is Princess Zarath. Report status. Static answered her for several long seconds before a harried voice responded. Your Highness, we're under coordinated attack. Multiple breaches in the outer security perimeter.
Armed forces wearing guard uniforms but not responding to command codes.
Inside job, Marcus said grimly.
Someone with access to uniforms and security protocols.
Father's location?
Princess Zarath demanded into her communicator.
Emperor Thaindar is secure in the Imperial bunker.
But, Your Highness, the attackers seem to be focusing their efforts on locating you and the human guest.
Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. They're after both of us specifically?
Princess Zarath's expression had gone cold and deadly.
Which means this isn't just about the succession. This is about eliminating the symbol of human-Veltar cooperation before it can take root. Symbol?
Marcus asked, but Princess Zarath was already moving, her blade ready and her movements taking on the predatory grace of a trained warrior. The life debt, she explained as they moved quickly through the sculpture garden, staying low among the larger art pieces. As long as it exists, as long as I'm bound to you, I can't marry into any of the traditional alliance structures. I can't be used as a political tool to cement power for the noble houses. A group of figures in palace guard armor rounded the corner ahead of them, weapons raised and scanning the garden with military precision. But something about their movement patterns made Princess Zarath tense.
Wrong formation, she whispered.
Real guards would never advance like that in these gardens. The fake guards spotted them at the same moment Princess Zarath made her assessment. Weapons fire erupted across the peaceful garden, energy bolts turning crystalline sculptures into explosions of superheated fragments. Princess Zarath moved like liquid death, her plasma blade deflecting energy bolts with impossible precision while she flowed between cover points. Marcus, lacking any weapon or training for this kind of combat, focused on staying alive and trying to keep up with her as she began a deadly dance through the garden. This way, she called, leading him toward what appeared to be a maintenance building hidden among the larger sculptures. More weapons fire erupted around them, and Marcus felt the heat of an energy bolt pass inches from his head. The acrid smell of vaporized stone and vegetation filled the air as their attackers systematically destroyed the peaceful beauty of the garden in their attempts to corner their targets. Princess Zarath reached the maintenance building first and began working on what appeared to be a hidden control panel. Emergency passages, she explained tersely.
Every section of the palace has them, but they require royal biometric confirmation to activate.
The panel flashed green, and a section of what Marcus had taken for solid wall slid aside to reveal a narrow tunnel lined with the same living light that illuminated the palace corridors. Move, Princess Zarath commanded, and they plunged into the tunnel just as another volley of energy fire seared the air where they'd been standing. The passage was cramped by Veltar standards, clearly designed for emergency evacuation rather than comfort. Princess Zarath led the way with sure steps, obviously familiar with the palace's hidden passages, while Marcus tried to process what was happening. Who's behind this? He asked as they moved quickly through the tunnel.
Could be my uncle Prince Demon, could be one of the militant noble houses, could be external enemies using the political chaos as an opportunity, she replied.
What matters right now is getting to a secure location where we can coordinate with loyal forces.
What about your father? The Imperial bunker is the most secure location in the palace. If he's there, he's safer than we are.
They emerged from the tunnel into what appeared to be a service area in one of the lower levels of the palace complex. The sounds of battle were muffled here, but emergency lighting had activated, bathing everything in harsh red illumination that made the normally beautiful architectural features look ominous. Princess Zarath moved to another hidden panel and began accessing what Marcus realized was a private communication network.
Commander Vexstar, this is Princess Zarath. Secure channel.
The response came immediately, though the transmission was filled with interference.
Your Highness, thank the ancestors you're alive. We've been trying to locate you. The attackers have taken control of sections 7 through 12 of the palace complex. Loyal force status?
Approximately 60% of palace security has confirmed loyalty. The rest are either compromised, killed, or cut off from communication. We're organizing a counterattack, but the enemy seems to have detailed knowledge of our defensive positions.
Inside information, Princess Zarath said grimly. Commander, I need immediate extraction for myself and Marcus Chen. Negative, Your Highness.
The enemy has positioned snipers to cover all the obvious extraction routes. But we've identified a secure position in the Crystal Spire where you can wait for the all-clear. Marcus noticed that Princess Zarath's expression had grown troubled.
Commander, who gave you those orders about the Crystal Spire? A pause in the transmission. Your Highness? Who specifically ordered you to direct us to the Crystal Spire? Prince Demon, Your Highness.
He's coordinating the defensive response from the secondary command center. Princess Zarath's face went white, and she cut the transmission immediately.
That's not good, is it? Marcus asked.
The Crystal Spire is a dead end, she replied, checking her weapon's charge level.
Beautiful view, single entrance, no emergency exits. Perfect place for an ambush.
So your uncle is involved?
Appears that way.
Her voice was carefully controlled, but Marcus could see the pain in her eyes.
Family betrayal cut deep, even in political dynasties where such things were always possible. What do we do now?
Princess Zarath was quiet for a moment, and when she looked at Marcus, her expression had changed into something harder and more determined.
Now we take the initiative, she said. Instead of running, instead of hiding, we go on the offensive. Against an unknown number of armed attackers with military training? Against traitors who think they can use violence to override the legitimate succession.
Her voice carried the steel of absolute authority. Marcus, you're about to see what it really means to be Veltar Royal. She began moving through the service areas with new purpose, and Marcus realized she wasn't heading for safety. She was heading toward the center of the conflict.
Where are we going?
The secondary command center, she replied. If my uncle is coordinating the palace defenses from there, then that's where we'll find answers about who's really behind this attack.
That sounds incredibly dangerous. Probably.
But sometimes the most dangerous course of action is also the most necessary one. They moved through maintenance corridors and service passages that Princess Zarath navigated with the confidence of someone who'd explored every inch of the palace during her childhood. The sounds of battle grew stronger as they approached the administrative section of the complex, and Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons echoing through the corridors. There, Princess Zarath said, pointing to a ventilation grate that overlooked the secondary command center. Through the grate, Marcus could see a large room filled with tactical displays and communication equipment. Prince Demon stood at the center, directing operations with calm efficiency. But what made Marcus's blood run cold was the realization that Prince Demon wasn't just coordinating defenses.
He was coordinating the attack itself.
Base Teams 7 and 9 maintain pressure on the outer perimeter, Prince Demon was saying into a communication device.
But ensure that palace security believes they're pushing you back. The illusion of successful defense must be maintained until Phase 2 is complete. Phase 2? Princess Zarath whispered. Prince Demon continued his instructions. Termination teams, report status on primary targets.
Princess located in service level C, came a response.
Confirming termination within the hour. Excellent. And the human? Target acquired. Both subjects will be eliminated before dawn.
Marcus felt Princess Zarath tense beside him, and he realized that she was preparing for something drastic.
What are you planning? He whispered. Justice, she replied simply. Against a room full of armed conspirators? Marcus, she said, turning to look at him directly, what I'm about to tell you must remain between us, regardless of what happens next. Okay. The life debt you refuse to acknowledge isn't just a personal obligation. It's a spiritual bond recognized by the deepest laws of our people. While it exists, while I owe you my life, I possess certain capabilities. What kind of capabilities? Princess Zaratiech's eyes began to glow with the same silver light that marked her blade. The kind that explain why my uncle is so desperate to eliminate both of us. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Princess Zaratiech kicked out the ventilation grate and dropped into the command center with fluid grace. The plasma blade in her hand flared to brilliant life as she landed in a combat crouch that seemed to make the air itself vibrate with potential energy. The reaction in the command center was instantaneous. Prince Demon spun toward the sound, his own weapon appearing in his hand with practiced speed, while his conspirators scrambled for cover behind the tactical displays. Hello, Uncle, Princess Zaratiech said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the walls resonate. Having an interesting evening? Zaratiech, Prince Demon replied, his tone almost regretful. You always were too clever for your own good. Clever enough to recognize treason when I see it. Treason? Prince Demon laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. I'm trying to save the Empire from a succession crisis that will tear it apart. Your attachment to that human has made you unfit to rule. My attachment to justice has made me exactly the ruler the Empire needs. The standoff stretched between them, uncle and niece facing each other across the command center with weapons drawn and centuries of imperial law hanging in the balance. Surrender now, Princess Zaratiech continued, and I'll ensure you receive a fair trial before the imperial court. Fair trial? Prince Demon's expression hardened. From a princess who values the life of an alien cargo pilot over the stability of the empire? From a ruler who values life over politics? Prince Demon raised his weapon, and Marcus realized that words had failed. The next few seconds would determine not just their survival, but the future direction of the entire Veltar Empire. What happened next changed Marcus's understanding of what Princess Zaratiech truly was. She moved not just with the speed and precision of a trained warrior, but with something beyond normal physical capability. Her blade seemed to cut through space itself, leaving trails of silver light that lingered in the air like frozen lightning. Prince Demon was skilled, experienced, and absolutely ruthless. But he was fighting someone who had access to powers that went beyond mere training. The combat that followed was less a fight than a demonstration of what it truly meant to be imperial royalty in a species that had evolved beyond purely physical limitations. When it was over, when Prince Demon lay unconscious and his conspirators had surrendered, Princess Zaratiech turned to Marcus with eyes that still held silver fire. Now you understand, she said quietly, why the life debt is more than just a cultural tradition. And why there are those who fear what our alliance might become. As loyal palace guards secured the command center and began the process of restoring order, Marcus realized that he'd witnessed something that would change his understanding of both Princess Zaratiech and the true nature of the political forces at work in the Empire. The assassination attempt had failed, but it had revealed truths that would reshape everything that came after. The aftermath of Prince Demon's failed coup attempt brought revelations that shook the Veltar Empire to its foundations. As investigators combed through the seized communications and interrogated captured conspirators, a web of corruption emerged that reached into the highest levels of imperial society. Noble houses that had seemed loyal for generations were revealed to have been plotting against the succession for years, while military commanders who had sworn sacred oaths to the crown had sold their honor for promises of power under a new regime. Marcus found himself at the center of a political maelstrom unlike anything in recorded imperial history. The simple human cargo pilot who had rescued a princess was now being hailed as the catalyst that had exposed the rot within the Empire's power structure. But, with that recognition came dangers that went far beyond mere political opposition. Emperor Thaindar summoned Marcus to a private audience 3 days after the coup attempt, in chambers deep within the palace where the walls themselves were said to record conversations for posterity. The emperor looked older than when Marcus had first met him, as if the betrayal by his own brother had aged him in ways that mere time could not. Sit, Marcus Chen, the emperor said, gesturing to a chair that adjusted itself to accommodate human proportions. We have much to discuss.
Marcus settled into the chair, acutely aware that this conversation might determine not just his own future, but the future relationship between humanity and the Veltar Empire. Your Majesty, Marcus began, but Emperor Thaindar raised a hand for silence.
First, you must understand what you have witnessed, the Emperor said.
The abilities my daughter displayed during the confrontation with Prince Demon are not common knowledge, even among our own people. They represent genetic traits that emerge only in direct bloodline descendants of the imperial family, and only under conditions of extreme stress or spiritual significance. The life debt, Marcus said, beginning to understand.
Precisely.
The bond created by your rescue has awakened dormant capabilities that confirm beyond any doubt her fitness to rule. But it has also created a situation unprecedented in 3 millennia of imperial history. Emperor Thaindar rose and began pacing, his movements expressing an agitation that his words couldn't quite convey. A Veltar royal bound by life debt cannot marry according to traditional protocols, he continued. The spiritual bond supersedes political alliances, makes conventional dynastic marriages impossible. For 3,000 years, this has never been a problem because the circumstances required for such a bond to form between royalty and outsiders simply never arose.
Until I came along, Marcus said quietly. Until you demonstrated that humans possess qualities our society had forgotten existed.
Selfless courage, moral clarity uncompromised by political calculation, the willingness to risk everything for someone you had never met. The Emperor stopped pacing and fixed Marcus with his piercing gaze.
The question now is what we do about it.
The noble houses expect Princess Zarath to marry within the traditional alliance structures that have maintained imperial stability for generations. But the life debt makes such marriages spiritually and legally impossible.
What are the options? 3, as I see it, Emperor Thaindar replied.
First, we could declare the life debt invalid due to species differences, though that would require overturning fundamental spiritual law and would likely be seen as weakness by our enemies.
Second,
Princess Zarath could formally renounce her claim to the succession, freeing herself from royal obligations but also abandoning the empire to those who would return us to the isolation and stagnation that marked our past. Marcus felt a chill run through him.
And the third option?
Emperor Thaindar was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with an intensity that seemed to peer into his soul. The third option, the Emperor said finally, is for you to formally accept the life debt and all its implications.
Which means what exactly?
Marriage to Princess Zarath, full integration into the imperial family, and active participation in governing an empire of 10,000 worlds.
Marcus felt the universe tilt around him. Your Majesty.